Hey everybody, today we're going to take a look at another political shift. This time it's going to be in the US House between 2022 and 2024. And the way it's going to work is we're going to take the combined US House popular vote in each state and compare it between the 2 years. This is not about any individual districts, unless the state happens to only have one at-large district. It's not the absolute most useful data of all time. Maybe you happen to not be into this particular shift. So after this, of course, we're going to have a map at the end. But first, let's put up the national background information. So in the 22 midterms, Republicans got 50.0, Dems got 47.3. So that's going to be our starting point. Then in 24, Republicans bumped it up to 50.5 in that national popular vote. Democrats also bumped it up to 47.9. So not a gigantic swing there, but how does that trickle down into each individual state? Well, that takes us into this fantastic looking spreadsheet right here. And let's go through the columns. The left column are the states. Then we've got the statewide popular vote in the U.S. House for the Democrats in 2022. Next, it's the same thing for the Republicans. Next to that, it's the 2024 U.S. House popular vote in each state for the Dems. Then the same for the GOP. Then we've got the Democratic shifts between those two elections, followed by the Republican shifts. And the last column is the net change between the two parties between the two elections. And then this column also has the usual shading. The darkest colors are going to be 10 or more points. The lightest colors are going to be under 5. Now, with that said, there are several things to point out before we get into this. First of all, this is not the easiest data to come by. I took most of it from Wikipedia. Even then, they didn't have all the data available, so I tried to fill in the gaps myself. If I did everything completely on my own, it would just take many, many hours. So I've got to try to rely on the data I have on Wikipedia. For the most part, I think it's close enough. However, the other thing is some of the data is actually just kind of inconsistent for certain years. Usually it's not off by that much, but still sometimes it can be frustrating if you're trying to match up different numbers. Now, the other thing to mention is that this is just comparing the statewide popular vote for each party in the U.S. House. It's not a perfect metric because some races in some states did not have any opposition for some of these candidates. That's going to skew the data. There's also some states like New York and Connecticut. They have fusion voting, which also can make some of the data a little bit harder to piece together. And then in some states like California and Washington, they might have 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans in the general election. That's another thing that can sway the data. Louisiana also has a jungle primary. That's another thing that can occasionally complicate some of this data. And there's also going to be all kinds of other different factors such as turnout. One of these is a midterm, one of these is a presidential election. And finally, some districts have third-party candidates in the general election. That also could have an impact on some of these races, but the only time it's going to play a significant role is if there's just one at-large U.S. House district in that state. Then we're going to use that third-party or independent data in place of the Democrat or the Republican. We've got that data in italics. Again, there's a whole lot here. Some of these numbers have gotten updated over the past few weeks, and I try to have it as accurate as I can. But if there's going to be any mistakes on any of these sheets, it's probably going to be this one because the data is just much harder to get. So with all that exposition out of the way, let's start here in Alabama. In 2022, the statewide popular vote in the U.S. House for the Democrats was 23.7. For the Republicans, it was 70.1. In 24, Democrats actually picked up a second seat in that state, and their popular vote went up to 25.3. Republicans went up even higher to 73.7. That's a net gain of 1.6 for the Dems, also a net gain of 3.6 for the GOP. That's a total net shift of 2% away from the Dems and toward the Republicans. But again, keep in mind a lack of opposition and third-party candidates. That's going to make this a little bit of a wild ride as we go through this. But that's how it works. Now we can quickly go through the rest of these states. Alaska, with ranked choice voting, that shifted a big 12.4 toward the Republicans. Arizona went toward the left by a significant 9%. Arkansas, a small blue shift of 9/10. California got redder by 5.8. Colorado also by 0.9. Now we've got blue shifts. Connecticut by 3%. Delaware 3.3. And even Florida by 3.2. Georgia very slightly redder by 0.6. Hawaii got bluer by 4.6. Idaho redder by 1.8. Illinois had an even redder shift of 6.6. Indiana slightly bluer by 1.4. Iowa a slight swing toward the Republicans of 0.6. Kansas same direction by 2.7. Kentucky had the biggest red shift out of all the states. That's by a massive 14.7. Louisiana took a big step toward the Dems by 8.2. That's another red state where the map was redrawn and Dems picked up another seat. Maine swung back toward the right by 4.2. Maryland, same direction by 1.3. In the Bay State, Massachusetts, it had the biggest shift out of all the states. That's a state that has a lot of districts with few Republican opposition. So that's why the Dems went up so much, and it's by a staggering 21.1. In Michigan, Republicans actually flipped that vote this time, and it swung 3 points in their direction. Minnesota got redder by 1.1, and Mississippi got a lot redder than that by 10.7. Missouri, a very mild shift toward the left of 0.8. Montana, an even smaller shift toward the right by 0.2. Nebraska, exact same shift in the opposite direction. In Nevada, that had a big shift toward the Republicans. Again, a lot of that is going to be because of third-party candidates running instead of a Democrat in one of those House races. New Hampshire toward the GOP by 2.9. New Jersey by 2.6. And let's give some credit here to New Mexico. Looks like the exact same margin for both parties in both years. That comes out to 0% movement in either direction. New York got bluer by an even 3. North Carolina redder by 5.7. North Dakota way redder than that by 14.2. But again in 22 for the Dems. That's in italics there because that's an independent candidate running and not a Democrat. Because there's only one district, we're going to use that data anyway. Ohio, very little shift there, 0.8 toward the Republicans. Now we've got some blue shifts. Oklahoma, 1.2. Oregon, 2.7. Pennsylvania, 3.1. Rhode Island, 8.7. South Carolina, a massive 12.6. And South Dakota by 10.8. But again, at 22, there was a libertarian candidate running and not a Democrat. Tennessee got redder by 7/10. Texas, a little bit bluer by 2.1. Utah, same direction, 0.6. Vermont took a small step toward the right by 1.1. Virginia, the other direction, by 0.7. Washington, back to the right by 1.3. West Virginia, 6.5 toward the Republicans. Wisconsin, a big shift there toward the Dems. That's going to be by 12.3. And Wyoming, 3.6 toward the Republicans. And there's your national shift. There's actually no shift whatsoever. Both parties gained 0.6%. And we also don't have the territories or any of the shadow representative elections on here either. But other than that, those are all of the states and all of the shifts. Again, there could be a mistake in there. That's entirely possible. But if you want to help visualize this data, we could take all of it and apply it to a map. If we do that, here it is. We've got similar shading. The darkest colors are 10 or more points. This time, the very lightest colors are going to be under 1 point. Those are going to be the tilt margins. So we've got 4 levels of shading. And this did take some time to put together. So what are the conclusions from any of these shifts? Well, right off the bat, I could say this is one of the craziest shadings I've ever done. It's almost completely even from coast to coast. A total random mix of red and blue. Deep red states getting bluer, deep blue states getting redder, and everything in between. So that kind of tells me there's not a whole lot of utility in this particular data. And I've said it many times in this video. Some of the states have skewed data because of the factors I listed. There's not a lot you can do if certain districts have no opposition or 2 Dems or 2 Republicans running in the general. All I did was take the data I had, put it together, and put it on a map. It's not supposed to be extremely hard hitting. It's just supposed to be kind of neat so you could see which states had any kind of a shift. And it almost looks like I pretty much randomly picked a color for every state. And you even had New Mexico that had absolutely no shift. So given there wasn't a lot of movement nationally, and there wasn't a big net change in seats by party, I guess everything kind of evened out. Plenty of states had gerrymandering that held up. I will be looking at the fairness of the maps yet again for the 2024 elections. But ultimately, based on the national popular vote for the House, Republicans should come out of this with a majority, and they do. And at a glance, they probably should have picked up another 3 or 4 seats. But the way the seats are allocated in different states, they ended up coming out of this with an extremely tiny majority. So all this could easily change in the next election. And anytime you get no major party opposition in the general, that easily skews the statewide popular vote for each party. It's going to be more noticeable in states with fewer districts. But again, not much I can do about it. This is the data that I have. Hopefully it's close to, if not totally accurate, but let me know in the comments. What do you think about any of the U.S. House popular vote shifts in each state? How many of these states are surprises for you? Which do you think are going to swing back in the next election? And which states do you think have the most skewed results based on the factors I listed? Let me know down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to help support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.